welcome to part 3 of this video. So yesterday in part 2 we talked about the election of Madison. So I just want to finish that up real quick, and then we'll jump into the War of 1812. We only have a little bit to cover on the war because APUSH doesn't really test you guys on war knowledge. It's basically the political and social aspects of said war. So we are going to finish breaking down this election of Madison and the lead up towards the War of 1812 right now. In late 1811, William Henry Harrison, governor of the Indiana Territories, assembled a small army and advanced on Prophet Town, a settlement located at the junction of the Wabash and Tippecanoe rivers that served as headquarters for the Indians. White Tecumseh traveled to recruit followers, and a few braves attacked Harrison and his men. Although the Indians were overpowered, the Battle of Tippecanoe pushed Tecumseh to join forces with the British against the United States. So, Indians joined with Britain. So, Indian-Britain alliance. That's what. So support for Jefferson's strategy of peaceful coercion to manage international affairs began to weaken. War, Madison believed, was necessary to defend the future of the Republican experiment and to prove to the world the viable democracy as a form of government. On June 1st, 1812, Madison asked Congress to declare war on Britain, and Congress narrowly agreed. So War of 1812 started. The vote divided the House and the Senate. Republicans in the South and West backed their president's decision to use force, while Federalists in New England questioned the judgment to engage the largest navy in the world in battle for the second time. This was known as the Second Revolutionary War to many historians because they're defending democracy in the war. Defending democracy. They are defending democracy in this war. So let's talk about the war itself. So the war has started, and the House and Senate is split. Well, the Republicans, for the most part, still back Jefferson's foreign policies. New elections were transforming the party. Older politicians who modeled the Republican Party policy and put Jefferson and Madison in power were replaced by daring young go-getters such as Henry Clay of Kentucky, who were intent on defending Americans' honor. These new leaders, called war hawks by the Federalist opponents, were the primary force behind Madison's decision to call for war with Britain. So we have this sort of new breed of politicians. Henry Clay of Kentucky became the leader of what was known by the Federalists as the War Hawks. And this won't be the last time we hear about Henry Clay. No, no, no. Henry Clay is very influential when it comes to American politics. To lead the Americans into battle, Madison relied on several veterans who served in the Revolution. However, these soldiers were now much older and far removed from battlefield experience. They lacked So Madison called upon these retired revolutionary generals to lead his army into war. As the war waged on, the American military became hardened by the experience of battle. In the fall of 1813, a fleet led by Captain Oliver Hazard Perry defeated British forces that controlled Lake Erie. As British troops retreated from Detroit, William Henry Harrison gave chase and defeated them at the Thames River. The battle was a turning point for the Americans because among the dead was Chief Tecumseh. Without the powerful leadership, the Indians failed to fight. They did not want to fight anymore. So we see the fall of the Indians. During the spring of 1814, British leaders launched a plan to end the war once and for all. An army of 11,000 men marched southward from Montreal, while another group sailed from Jamaica to New Orleans to control the waterways. So they had a plan in place to stop the war in its tracks and defeat the Americans. When the British troops reached Washington, they encountered little resistance and set the Capitol and the White House on fire. President Madison watched hopelessly as redcoats took souvenirs before the blaze grew out of control. The group then marched up to Fort McHenry, where they fired more than 1,800 shells in just over 24 hours. Witnessing the continuous bombings was Francis Scott Key. Just before the attack, Key had sneaked on board a British ship in order Key had sneaked on board a British ship in search of a captured doctor. Key kept his eyes on Fort McHenry and on the American flag that flew over the fort as rockets lit up the night sky. When daylight arrived, Key peeked out from his cover to see the stars and stripes still waving. The Americans had successfully defeated their ground. If this story is familiar to you and you heard this story via song, this story inspired our national anthem. Later that year, the British planned another attempt to overtake New Orleans. An armada of 60 ships and 11,000 men, led by Major General Sir Edwin Pakenham, set out from Jamaica to the mouth of the Mississippi River. As the fleet sailed through swamps and bayous before approaching the city from the east, American farmers saw the ships and raced to inform General Andrew Jackson, who was in charge of defending the Gulf Coast. Jackson quickly rallied his troops and ambushed the British fleet. The battle raged for weeks before Pakenham ordered his soldiers to advance on the Americans, who had dug in just outside of New Orleans. The American army, which consisted of soldiers, sailors, pirates, militiamen, and freed slaves, used a strategy of revolving firing lines to make sure that guns were always firing at the redcoats. So this ragtag American army defeated the British in the Battle of New Orleans. And if you're just wondering, the Battle of New Orleans was fought at the Chalmette battlefield about 4 miles outside of the lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans. It's not that interesting. It's just a green strip of land with plaques and signs everywhere. But that's where it happened. Okay. In 1814, during the same time that Britain carried out its plan to defeat General Jackson and take control of New Orleans, an American delegation met with British representatives in the small Belgian city of Ghent to discuss the possibility for peace. Members of the American group included former Secretary of the Treasury Albert Gallatin, Speaker of the House of Representatives Henry Clay, and a bunch of other leaders. Confident that their army would be victorious, the British made several heavy-handed demands. For example, Britain wanted the United States to give nearly all of the Northwest Territories to the Indians and relinquish control of the Great Lakes and portions of Maine. But the Americans refused. After several days of negotiating, the British envoys received words of several defeats the British army had suffered in the United States and reconsidered their bargaining position. The Treaty of Grant, signed on Christmas Eve in 1814, was easily a draw. It called for both the British and Americans to quit fighting and return conquered territory. It made no reference to the complaints that prompted the United States to declare war on Britain. Search and seizures, orders in council, and the repressment of American sailors were basically ignored, and both parties were content to agree to a truce. After the treaty was signed, ships were free to sail to any port. Goods could be traded with any consumer, and Royal Navy warships no longer patrolled American coastline. So the War of 1812 ended in a draw. Nobody won the war. But in the next lesson, when we talk about James Monroe and the era of good feelings, the war did bring up a lot of patriotism and nationalism into America. And we'll get to that next video.